Welcome, welcome, welcome. Another
Yo,
episode
yo,
of
yo.
TV. I just want to welcome a good friend, somebody who I actually look up to, who works hard, entrepreneur Jomaree Pickard. What's up, buddy? How you feel?
General, what's going on?
Nothing. CEO, co-founder of Hella Coctail.
I'm trying. Make it till you make it.
How you doing? How you holding up during the whole COVID
I'm
craziness?
Listen, man, the COVID thing is crazy. For us, and I'll tell you a lot more about it. But for us, like half of our business is hospitality, and bars, restaurants, and stuff like that have been closed since March, and it really just kind of like starting to open. So we've been buried, in a bad way, and so we're just trying to like figure out different ways to navigate, pivot during the pandemic, and give people what they need. So yeah, it's been tough, but like we're still here. I like to think about 2020 like an NCAA tournament. I know you're a big basketball head, so the idea of surviving and advancing. That's what 2020 is all about: survive and advance.
So let's real quick and let's talk about the whole Hella Coctail. What is it?
Yep.
I know you started in 2012, but let the people know what's it.
Yeah, for sure. So the Hella Cocktail Company, also known and formerly known as Hella Bitters, we basically make all the accoutrement behind the bar. That's not the spirit. So think about your bitters, your syrups, your Bloody Mary mix, your margarita syrup, everything that you need to create the cocktail, all the tools that are not the spirit. So like we supply bars, restaurants, airlines, hotels, retail stores like Whole Foods, with all the other stuff to make the drink.
And then and you started in 2012, but you had no really experience in this business.
Hustler, straight hustler, homie.
So how did let's take it back a little bit. We're gonna take it back to, you was you went to UVA, University of Virginia, and then you was also a graduate of Walton Business School out of UPenn. Smart guy, let's
take
talk
it till you make it.
Yeah, let's talk about that journey. Why Virginia? You're from New York.
Yeah.
And and then how did you get into Walton Business School?
Yeah, so like you noticed, but some other people might not know. I'm from Long Island City, Queens. I'm from Ravenswood Houses, out here, which is actually where I have the office, kind of station back in Long Island City. So, I grew up in a tough and rough neighborhood, as you know, as a lot of us have. And for me, I was always just curious cat. Like you can see over the East River, you see all, Manhattan skyline. And you're just like, yo, what's going on over there? Like, what is that about? And who's in those buildings and how they making it move? I see cars, I see buildings, I see airplanes. You see the hustle and bustle of NYC. You see the trains. You're like, where's everybody going, right? And so I was just curious about how things worked. And I think for me, my journey has always been about how things work and trying to discover it and like unpack that to figure out like what success looks like for people so that I know what I wanted in my life. And so I think, for me, along the journey, I always loved sports, which is why you and I connected. I love sports. I love media. I love food and beverage. I love social like gatherings. And so for like, what better space can you be in, when I fast forward than like food and beverage, because that's a totally social experience. And so that's how I got here. But if I go backwards, it's all about discovering how things work. And that led me to like, Newtown High School in Queens, down to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Jersey first before I even transferred to University of Virginia, back in the day. And the reason I went there was because actually my little brother was going there and he skipped the grade. So we graduated high school at the same time. He went to UV. I went to Fairleigh because I went to play sports. And I used to go visit him. And I was like, if you guys remember a different world, it looked like a different world down there, right? I was like, oh shit, this is like a campus. There's like stuff to do all day long. There's massive libraries, massive like food halls. The sporting events are crazy. There's like Spring Fling, which is like all black everything. So it was just like this like eye opener where I was like, oh, this is where you come and get it done if you really want that a different world experience, which you only saw on TV. And so I had to go down there and figure it out. Also at that time, which I think it still is, it was the #1 public institution in America. So I was like, wow, if I could exit that school, I'm gonna hopefully set myself up for entering the job market, at that time. So that was kind of like the game plan was like, oh snap, it's some of that life, but it's also like the #1 institution. and that would set up some dominoes for me in the future. So that's what took me there. And so I think every part of my life, I've always thought about, like, again, how things work, how to build stuff, and then how to move on to get to the next chapter, which is not necessarily about making money, but it's all about like my personal discovery about things that I like to do.
So, you graduate from Virginia and then you go to one of the top business schools in the country.
Like the top business school in the country.
How was that process?
So in between there, I worked in corporate America, and I did that for 6 years. And I think what helped me transition was I had an amazing job at like a small firm that allowed me to travel around the world. And it allowed me to travel around the world and like access companies and talk to CEOs about the things they were working on, which were across many different industries, in order to understand how their business worked. Believe it or not, I got paid to understand how other businesses worked. Mm-hmm. Right. And that was for me like, oh, this is amazing. But I knew that I was missing something, right? I was missing all like the mechanics of how it worked. So I was understanding that it worked, and I understand the numbers behind it, but I don't understand the frameworks for what took a business from A to B and B to C. Mm-hmm. And so again, this was more unpacking and more discovery for me by applying and actually getting into the Wharton Business School, which was at the time, and I think it still is, the #1 business school in the world. Not America, not Europe, and in the world. And so that allowed me to like really not have only access to like understanding how companies work, but the people that worked at those companies and were coming to school to be on a collective journey, because people were coming from all over the world in different industries to figure out their own space, right? So now you put all these heads together and you start learning from other people about what they're doing. And so for me, that was just like a great experience to understand frameworks, but also understand like networks, right? And how those things really work in the real world versus our little space that we operate in from here to there.
Yeah, people don't realize, like, when you go to a school like that, like the key is, like you said, is the networking. The people that you meet, some of the smartest people from all over the world go to this school. Can you talk about like some of the relationships that you was like, you realized like when you was there, like, whoa, I can really learn some things?
Yeah, no, I can't. I probably can't mention names because the things are so crazy. But like, when we went to Thailand, I went to like the equivalent of the White House. We sat with the president. You know what I'm saying? Like in the White House, talking about like what was going on. I think there was like a protest out there that day that we were at their White House, and it was just like we're in the middle of like their kind of like political, economical systems and what's going on, and learning it firsthand of like, this man has to go out there and say X, Y, Z in this moment. And, you don't get that kind of access, right? And so we were meeting with like the targets of like Singapore. You know what I'm saying? You're meeting with the behemoths and understanding of like what they're going through on a day-to-day business and really dissecting their business on a day-to-day, that's part of your coursework. And so, you're meeting heads of state, you're meeting like, in Japan, you're meeting like the top executives at Toyota, the people that actually sell us millions of cars a year. You're meeting like how they think about our culture. You go into like the Red Bull plant and literally understanding how they built Red Bull from the steel sheets to how they changed the formula in out there versus the sweeter, sugary version that Americans like out here. You go out to Asia and the Red Bull tastes completely different. You have no idea why. And you understand how they did the research and development, and they change the flavors based on where they're going to send the product, right? And so you start really like dissecting how like the machine works across different industries. So we can't really beat that kind of experience.
So you graduate from Wharton, and the first thing you do when you're done with Wharton is what?
So actually, when I was at Wharton, I was actually doing some independent studies at the same time with the NFL, Major League Soccer, the NBA, because I was really interested in the business side of sports. And so I thought that was I was like, maybe that'll be one of my journeys. And so I started actually working for the NFL while I was in school, because they were doing a lot of initiatives around player development and around off the field initiatives that they didn't have a business mind to help lead. They had a real dope dude who's still there now, Troy Vincent, who was I want to say he's second or third behind the commissioner. He's the president of officiating now, but when we were working together, he was running this group called Player Development. Mm-hmm. and I was his business brain. So it was like, Troy, figure out what we want to do, and then Jomarree, like, execute it and make it happen in terms of like the X's and O's and the dollar amounts and how the machine would really work it. And so I did that for a while, and that was super like, interesting, because I was again on the cutting edge of something that wasn't there, but was trying to be done in a lot of other sports, right, at the same time. And so I think a lot of what we see now is in the NBA, and the NHL, and obviously in the NFL, you're starting to see people have voice, take control of the narrative, understand their power dynamic. And so that was something I was trying to get people to understand from the high school, college level, all the way through the pros. Like, you actually have way more power than you believe if you collect it and put it and drive it towards a certain place. So yeah, that was part of the beginning steps for me, which were really cool. But that also, what was not interesting about it for me was that it was a service-based business, meaning you're on the clock, right? And so if you're not getting paid, if you're not on the clock and delivering those results, it's a harder business to work, right? It's time consuming. You could like really, really bang your head against the wall trying to get stuff done. And I always wanted to be in a unit-based business. And that's when when I take all my hats off and I think about like how things work. You have a lot of service-based businesses, consulting, go to the office, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have a unit-based business, which when sometimes you create it, has enough inertia, it drives itself. You push it a little bit, but it starts to go down the hill. Yeah. So that's how I got that. That's how I separated those two things as I jumped into Hella.
Yeah, because I remember, I think we met in 2011, and I know that's when you was pretty much starting to figure it out. Like, you wanted to go on your own. I remember when we talked about that. What fueled you to say, well, what made you say to yourself, like, you know what, I'm just going to go on my own and try to make some things happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's like confidence of like the ability that you have to know how to like do it. I think I'm also a very risky person in terms of like my belief in my abilities. Like, I don't mind, you have to think about your risk profile. Some people are really conservative and like they need that check to rely on. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But I'm the kind of person that has always been like venturing and trying to push forward and like not really worried about what I'm going to land on, because I never had anything to land on when I started the journey. So I was never scared of like failing because I started with zero. So I know what it's like to get from zero to something. So I'm never afraid of hitting zero, because I feel like this is going to allow me to always rebound, right? And so I'm always trying to push through that. And I think that was a primary lever that I was like, well, I want to create wealth for myself, and I don't want it to be at the behest of someone else's opinion of how good I am. You know what I'm saying? You go to corporate America, you go to a lot of places, you work for somebody, there's a ladder there, there's a ceiling, and then someone else's opinion of you is like how far you get. And I was like, oh, that ain't gonna work for me, right? Once you start to feel that out, you're like, that ain't good. So if you don't like me, I'm not gonna win. If you don't think I'm smart enough, I'm not gonna win. If I don't speak to you correctly in the voice that you feel, if I don't wear my tie perfectly with the knot, if I don't wear the perfect shoot, oh, I can't do none of this. Like, none of this can work for me. I'm a fail. So it was like, I got to go on my own journey so that I can flip the machine on its head and become at the top of it versus the bottom.
So in 2012, how did you get into the whole process of, Hella Coctail?
Oh man, good question. I mean, it was a hobby amongst friends. So I have two buddies, and I don't know if you used to come to my barbecues back in the day, but I used to have this crazy barbecue in the crib, and then I brought it to John Jay. I think we have like 500, 1,000 people. It's all, Black professionals and stuff like that. It was super cool. But I had met two of my buddies back in the day shooting my brother's music video in Brooklyn. And they were the kind of hipster kids that like make a homemade pizza and then like try to one-up each other making cocktails. And bitters was like one of those cool things. They used to be at the barbecues. We used to chop it up all the time. And then we just became friends and hit it off. And we just had this hobby of like making stuff. And at that time it was, Williamsburg. And the hobby like got a little bit out of control. We did like a Kickstarter campaign, tried to raise like $900 just to make a big batch, raised like $2,500, and then like started going to like mom and pop bars and restaurants in the area. Like, oh, we have this excess product. What do you think about it? And then it just started to snowball where people started to pick it up. And we're like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a cool thing. Now, we didn't turn it into a business for years, but it was a hobby that had legs, and we were like testing out the hobby while everyone had the full-time job. I was still at the NFL. My business partner was still like, one was a bartender, one was at Adweek. And so we were just like, hustling, right? And the hustle started to get some inertia, and people started to ring the phones and say, "What is this? What are you guys doing over there in the corner? Like, bring it to light." And yeah, it caught like a little bit of fire, and people got behind us, and we started to take off.
So it's three of you guys,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So what
But
year?
there's more now, but there's three co-founders.
Yeah. So at what year did you start? Like when you started creating a buzz, did you say, "All right, you know what, guys, we got to make a budget. We got to raise money." When did you figure it out? Like, you know what, I'm going to concentrate on full time because I think we have something.
Yeah, that was like 2014, 2015. So that's like 2 years and change after we were really like, started the hobby, where it was like, okay, there's something here. And I think what allowed us to do that was the fact that we were like reinvesting every single penny from the small batch we were making back into the company for larger and larger inventory, because we weren't thinking about like paying ourselves at that minute or at that moment. And so by the time we got to 2014, 2015, we had enough inventory and cash to be like, okay, it's time to go and like really turn it out, because now we can land on it and pay ourselves and get off our full-time jobs if we want to. And so we slowly milked ourselves our full-time job and onboarded on the hella as it started to have like more and more inertia.
I always say that for us, like, Black and brown people, it's like, I've always felt like, when you partner up with people, like everyone has to have the same goal. And like one of the things that's important, like you said, is like you guys reinvest it. And like a lot of people mess up nowadays because they, small businesses, because as soon as they make a couple of dollars, they want to say, "Hey,
my cut.
Bring me, I want my cut," instead of just let's build something. How did you guys, like, when you guys sat down, how was that whole conversation? Like, you know what, this is our plan, and we're going to reinvest everything that we have.
I think it's the conversation. I don't recall it perfectly, but basically the idea was, if you put this thing together for a certain amount of time, you have a large enough company where even if you wanted to walk home and leave at that point, you could, okay, right? And on top of that, you're also going to even if it's a fail, you're going to set yourself up for the next success, because you're a leader of something that was built, and you're going to have the experiences that showcase it. And so a lot of it wasn't about like dollars and cents. It was more about like the building block. Like, okay, here's something that none of us know how to do, but if we build it, then we could pay ourselves and we'll have the expertise to move into the next part of our life if we choose. And so for us, it was more about creating an opportunity space to jump on top of if things went well. And so I think everyone had that mindset, like this is not going to be $100 million company out of the box. Like, this is not Uber, this is not Google. Like, this is a finite good. It's a product, and it's a physical good. And so it's going to take time for people to believe in it, understand it, etc. And I think we were all had the wherewithal to understand that like that dynamic was true, and like not to try to fight it, right? Don't force the action in terms of trying to get to the dollar fast, because you're not going to win if you do that. And so, yeah, I think, we just understood it was a long play, and it was more about creating the opportunity for a good space versus like hitting a home run. Hit the bunt single first, then hit the single, then steal the base, then hit the single and score. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, okay, if we do that over and over and over again, we're going to win a game.
So what about, like, obviously when you deal with like partners, everyone has different ideas. How do you guys come up with like a common goal and say, all right, this is, you guys put in your own ideas and say, you know what, this is what we're going to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for us organically, and this was lucky, was that we all had our own individual unique skill sets that we brought to the table initially. So it was easy to carve up who could do what, because it was like naturally in your skill set. Like Tobin grew up on a relatively like quaint like farm. And so he wanted to be a chef. He came to New York City from Amherst, Massachusetts, because he wanted to be a chef back in the days. And then he realized, like, damn, he loves his family, and he didn't want to live in the kitchen, which most chefs do, which chefs won't know until you're a chef, that you live in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, well, I could parcel the skill set into something else. I know how things work, taste, combine, and I don't want to be a chef. So he became a bartender, right? And so he was really versed in how to make stuff. And so his job became like, yo, you R&D, like make the shit, like make it. right? While my skill set's more like finance, more like strategy. How does the machine work, right? So I can take the good and then say, okay, here's how we move it, right? Here's what store it needs to go to. Here's the type of consumer it needs to go to. Here's how it needs to look and feel. And so we're able to kind of sit in our swim lanes kind of organically again. And then we're not really bumping heads. We're just like, hey, I might say to Tobin, yo, that tastes too sweet, right? And that's enough for him to be like, okay, navigate. He might be like, yo, can we get $10 more for this? And I'll be like, bet. And so we're not really stepping on each other's toes. We're just kind of advising each other in our swim lanes based on our expertise. And that just grew out of, over for now, it's just growing more and more where we have other people that we can like now, drive our swim lanes even further down.
So did you guys bring in when you guys brought in investors, did they have like a major say so, or did they just say, you know what, we're going to follow your lead?
So oddly enough, we've never had any investors in the company. Right now we have like some angel investors, but that was only in the last like 2 or 3 years. But before that, we built the company literally, when they say bootstrap, meaning like you reinvest over and over and over. We reinvested for years. We reinvested so much that we were able to bring in people. So we basically only maneuver when we have enough money to do the next thing. So, okay, now we got X amount, bring in another person. Okay, we got X, Y amount, bring in another person. Okay, we have another amount, make a new product, right? So every time we regenerate the profit to pay ourselves and then pay for the next iterations, inventory, et cetera, et cetera. And so for us, we just literally use the growth of the company to finance bringing people in and making more inventory and creating new products.
So you guys have built it to, you guys have 45 employees?
No. Right now we have 6. We go from 6 to 20, kind of, we like, depending on the season, like holidays really ramp up. It's a really big season. At the height of our company, I think we were at like 20 something. Mm-hmm. And then we had to like pivot a little bit. COVID's here. So we had to do a little mixing and maxing, but we have 6 people that work with the company here. And then we probably employ somewhere between 40 and 50 people within our manufacturing of the products, our warehouse where we ship stuff out of and things like that. So that's where we spend a lot more money in terms of like our third parties, but they all work with our company. They're all responsible for a different piece of the puzzle.
So, you grow the company to, a $1 million company, turns into $1 million. How's that feel personally for you? Like, like you personally built, pretty much from scratch.
Scratch.
Over a $5 million company.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess the bad part about sometimes being an entrepreneur is that you forget to celebrate the wins, which I got to do a better job of just being honest, right? Like, I'm always forward looking, so I'm just like, okay, like what did we do wrong? And that's my like thing that I have that I got to figure out sometimes. Like I'm looking back, like, damn, we wasted X amount of dollars on that. Damn, like we need to like, how do we perfect that? Which is never real, right? You're never gonna hit perfection. But for me, I have a problem like looking backwards before I look forward. And so when I think about it, like it's cool, man. It's cool to say, it's cool to do something and then be recognized for it. But I think for me, it's cooler to know how the machine works, right? I'm like, oh, I know how this works. And so I think like that's like the win for me, right? It's like that's success for me is learning how something works and then turning back and telling other people this is how it works. You want to do this, and showing that blueprint. So that's what I look at as a successful piece is like, I don't ever look at the dollars and cents because it's relative. I'm still poor as hell, right? Yeah. In my head, I'm like, I'm broke. So what we talking about? But how it works, you can like, that's valuable.
Yeah, I always tell, me and some friends had a conversation over the weekend. We were talking about the importance of not cutting corners, because you always have that one, how we grow up. We always, when we were younger, we always try to cut corners to try to make
scheme on something. Yep.
We could get this for free instead of paying $10 for it or whatever. Can you talk about the importance of not cutting corners for you and your team?
Man, it's crazy. I mean, I grew up in Ravenswood, and I played hoops and I played baseball. Like those are my things that I did every day, right? And schoolwork and stuff like that. And so, my mom was a teacher. My dad was an MTA clerk for 30 years. He sold you the tokens, right? For 30 straight years. And so like those those few things had a crazy amount of discipline in them, right? Like you can't not show up to work. You can't show up 10 minutes late to the MTA booth where people are waiting to get the tokens. Like you can't show up late, right? You can't not like, you can't like miss practice. Like you can't like do stuff on a daily basis. So those things were ingrained into me from the jump. Like if you want the outcome, it's not about the game. The game is like the fun shit. That's like the end. That's like the celebration. You know what I'm saying? That's like popping the champagne. The work is inside the journey, right? The journey of the practice, the journey of doing the day-to-day work is the win. And so I don't even know how to do the corner cutting at this point. I don't even know how to do it. If I wanted to, I'd be like, I cut the corner, it'd be like 5:30 p.m. That's me cutting the corner. You'd be like, you leaving now? Yeah, this is early. So, it's super important to be disciplined, right? If you want something as a goal, you have no choice but to be disciplined. And the world, right? The people around you, the people like me won't let you win if you cut corners. You know what I'm saying? There's 100,000 of me waiting for you to cut the corner so I could jump right in, right? And be like, I got that. And once I do that, you're done. And so like people need to know, like when you cut the corner, there's somebody waiting for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's hungry, like old school back in the day, Cuban Dominicans coming to the major league, they waiting for the spot. Mm-hmm. And so like you can't cut corners or nothing that you do if you really want it. If you don't, like it's all good. Like I'll eat it.
Yeah. So you guys, you guys had during COVID, how did you have to pivot?
Good question, man. We had to we went heavy online. So our products luckily enough could be shipped online. So we went heavy like pivot towards Amazon online. We always think about meeting the consumer like where they are. So we were like, okay, where's our consumer right now? They're at home. We got to talk to our consumers at home. That means like sponsoring happy hour Zoom chats. That means like, trying to figure out like, okay, what season is it? Like, oh, this Cinco de Mayo, like ramp up the advertising on margaritas because we know that people are thinking about it. Also, like, people didn't have a place to go to hang out, right? You couldn't go to a bar, you couldn't go to a restaurant. So we needed to make sure we were on all our retail shelves, like front and center, stacked so that when you went to the store and you're like, well, what am I going to get? Well, you get the stuff that looks, if you never had it before, you get the stuff that looks the best and feels the best when you see it. And so we really just pivoted to like make sure all of our resources pointed to our retail, like mom and pop shops, and pointed towards digital because that's where everybody's living at the moment and probably for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you guys think the next couple of years is gonna be for Hella? Like, what's the overall goal?
Yeah, the goal for us is always to create the opportunity to move forward, right? So it's not like, okay, I'm trying to make $20 million this year, XYZ. It's always like that could be the goal, but is it in a space that has an opportunity? So we don't want to sell something or create something that's like old school. It doesn't make sense just because you're trying to make dollars because you're crushing the brand. So for us, it's like, okay, where is our consumer going to be in the future? Are they going to stay online or are they going to get tired? Or are they going to get fatigued? Like, where are they going? And so for us, it's always about monitoring and surveying and talking to the individual consumers to be like, what do you guys want and what do you guys need and where are you shopping at? And so right now we're seeing that like a lot of people are thinking about like cutting their sugar intake. So we created a line of these ready to drink sparkling bitters and sodas. Never been done before. We created a whole white space. The drinks are mad bitter. If you like sweet, like sorry, but there's a lot of people that don't want sugar in their life, especially in their cocktail, the vodka soda drinker, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're saying, okay, that's where the consumer is telling us, yo, we want a dope drink. We want it to taste slamming, but we don't want a ton of sugar. So we're like, okay, we'll make that because it's an opportunity space, but it's also solving what the consumer is asking us for. It doesn't mean we're going to get rid of the stuff we make, but that's what we push forward in.
So how do you guys, how do you, besides New York is your base. Where's your main bases? New York, LA, Miami?
So good question. It's all the cocktail cities. So yes, Chicago, LA, Oakland, San Fran, Miami, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Kentucky, Indiana, big cocktail cities, New Orleans. So all those big, thoroughfares where they're big cities. And And there's a lot of bars and restaurants and stuff like that.
So one of the things I always like to say, if you started the business all over again 5 years ago, what would you do different?
Ooh, good question. 5 years ago, if I was what would I do? I would probably have launched the bitters and sodas earlier if I could. I don't know what I don't know is if I would have I would have either succeeded and then we'd have been a much bigger company now, or we would have failed really fast because I wasn't sure if the consumer was ready for that taste yet. I think as like a lot more of the Western cultures, like Italian culture, has started to come over here. So like now you see things like an Aperol Spritz. You see things that have a lot more bitter notes that weren't here 5 years ago, right? You see the orange umbrellas everywhere, and that has allowed us to like flex a little bit more than we could have, even though we had the product ready, right? And so sometimes you need a bigger player to like shift the wind so that you could fit in versus you trying to shift the whole space when you're really tiny. So that's probably what I would have tested out, but you know.
Yeah. So when you started, like pretty much how much money you put in yourself to make this like now it's
yeah, we put in $2,500 in my credit card.
Each or total?
Each.
Okay.
25. So we had 7,500 in my credit card.
So you maxed it out pretty much.
That was it. Let's go.
And now, like when you think about it today, because like you say, you're always a forward thinker, and you don't take time sometimes to think about like, whoa, this is what I accomplished. Right now, how do you feel like like what you've done and built so far?
Ooh, well, it ebbs and flows, right? Because some days are like, yo, I hit a grand slam just now. Like we closed a Delta, like our products on like Delta Airlines, and so we smashed. I was like, wow, 7 figures, oh shit. And then, COVID happened and like, yo, airlines ain't serving nothing. Mm-hmm. They're not serving water. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh no. And so, you ebb and flow. So it feels good to know again that you could create something, you have the ability to do it, and like you could do it again. And now you could do it again with other people's money because they would give it to you based on what you've been able to do. So that's like, oh, that's a win, right? Again, I wanted to create a space that had the opportunity for the next move if there was, or continue this move. And so that feels dope. It's like, oh, I can do that. And everyone knows that I could do it, which is something I didn't have when I first started in this space. And so like, that's successful to me.
And so, yeah. So like pretty much the last question is, what's next for Jomarree and what's next for Hella?
Woo, good question. So today we literally dropped 3 new bitters and sodas flavors: grapefruit, lemon lime, and ginger turmeric. So check those out online on hellacoctail.co.
Where's the website?
Yeah, www.hellacoctail.co. They're incredible. They'll be on Amazon in the next week or two. And then hopefully they'll be in store soon. But right now you can find us in like all your Whole Foods have our other bitters and soda flavors. So that's what's next for Hella. As long as we have 5 total bitters and soda flavors. And that's going to be the rocket ship because get on board or get out the way. And for me, like I just riding the wave, like I'm gonna ride the wave. But my thing right now really is giving back. Like, okay, I know how to do certain things. I'm not an expert at everything, but I know enough to be dangerous. And so like, how do I give that back? Like, how do I show people how to do it? So a lot of what I'm doing right now is a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of how to. If you look at my gram, it's more like, yo, how do you do this stuff, right? Versus like, look at me, I killed it. That shit is whack to me. Like, our community is really good at like promoting themselves and being like, yo, I did it. Check me out. I'm the man. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. But what's cool is like, yo, let me show you how to do it. Here's the water. Here's the well. Like, let me show you how to drink. And so that's really what's next for me. I think that'll take me to wherever the next journey is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like, one thing was like, where can people find you? Where can people, if they want to follow you, if they want to go to Hella one more time? I think, like I said, we don't talk much, but I've always respected your grind.
I appreciate it,
and you're definitely somebody to look up to and follow. And I love the fact that you're giving back and teaching people like, hey, this is how you make money. Because like you said, a lot of people, they try. And the goal is the first thing is at least you
try. Yeah, you got to be motivated.
You got to be educated. more than anything. And like I said, I appreciate you coming on. It means a lot.
No, it's my pleasure, man. I'm so happy that you reached out. I'm so happy to be here. I'm like, if anyone has questions, find me on IG at Jomarree Pickard. If you want to hit Hella Coctail CEO, I'm always open to like questions, mentoring, like showing you how the movie works. Because like that's what it's all about. We're gonna leave our legacy at some point. And I just want mine to be like, he opened the door.
And that's what I was saying. More than anything, what's your last question? The main last question is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Just that I opened the door, right? I opened the door. I showed the blueprint. I showed you transparency, how it works. Like I said at the beginning, I was always curious about how things work, and I couldn't figure it out. Like there was no one to say, like, yeah, so how does it work? I'm like, I just want to show people how it works. At least right now. Like I'm hoping that the whole system changes a little bit based on like, the last 400 or 500 years of craziness that, it's harder for us to like get through the door. But given that this is the door right now, this is how this door works. I want you to see it. And then I want to help shift like where that door opens to, you know what I'm saying? So my legacy, that's my legacy. And for my kids and stuff to be like, like he did it. That's what he was doing. Like we on his back, you know what I'm saying? And be able to look up to that and be happy and proud of the work that I tried to put up, just as I'm proud of my parents and their work that they do. You know what I'm saying? That's it. There's not that much to it. It ain't to be a billionaire. It ain't to like have 40 Phantoms. Like that's all cool, but that's not the day-to-day stuff you go home to every day. That's gonna be enriching to your life. So, let's get on the field, play some softball. Let's go throw some hoops up, and then let's show everybody how to make a little bit of change.
Yeah, Jomarree, I appreciate it, man. Yo, stay on after I'm gonna log off, but stay on for a quick second.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you.